Hello there, everybody, and welcome to my Sunshield guide. I got turned on to Sunshield because I'm a little bit of an off-meta player, so I keep my ear to the grindstone for when people say things like, X doesn't work. That really piques my interest, and I just wanted to go and take a look at all of the things that people were trying and see if I could make Sunshield actually work, and what's behind it. And I actually managed to make a build that's a lot of fun in PvP and very functional in PvE, and that's the part that surprised me because I really didn't expect Sunshield to work in PvE as well as it has, and it's been a lot of fun. So here I am to take you through that journey. Now, one of the first mistakes that I saw people making for making their Blazing Shield builds was they were trying to hold on to a functional character. And I know that sounds funny, but they were still trying to keep decent magic, a high spell power, and they just weren't getting their HP into the stratosphere that they needed it to be for Sunshield to work. And I could totally understand that. It's a leap of faith. And in the second camp, they were putting into HP, but they were ending up with that same dysfunctional character that the first crew was afraid of. They cast 3 Sun Shields and then they're out of mana and dead, and they realize that that 60k life just disappears almost immediately. So what I endeavored to do was take more of the second camp's way of doing things, but in every available itemization opportunity, I tried to fight war against that dysfunctional aspect of a pure health build. And I feel like we're there, we're done. So let's move right into itemization. Now, you might have seen from my just from my other videos, I like to make a core, something that's always going to be the same. What it does is it makes your builds modular, which not only helps you share gear between characters, but it also helps you switch out new sets. And this set is a perfect example, or this build is a perfect example of that. It's probably one of my favorite builds for just switching out what you do by switching out your 5-piece. So I'm going to explain 2 cores here. The first core is for any 5-piece you choose that has 1 accessory, and the second core is for like a PVE set, like Leeching Plate, that has to go in these 5 slots. So let me show you that core. The first important part is to get mismatched Undaunted health bonuses, 1-1. Now there are tons of sets that are going to be on the list for this, so you just go whichever one has the right weights and traits for you. You've got a high chance, if you're doing dailies, of already having these sort of held up in your bank, and if you threw them away, it doesn't take you that long to farm them. Your weights might change depending on what you pick in these bottom pieces, but your traits are always going to be Divine Small and Infused Big. Small pieces are your shoulder, hands, belt, and feet. Big pieces are your shield, your legs, your chest, and your head. So all the big pieces are infused, all the small pieces are divines. So this could be Mephalas, this could be Valken, this could be Bogdan, this could be Narayanith, this could be Maw, this could be, there's a Malabeth, there's a lot of 1-piece health, Undaunted head and shoulders. It doesn't matter which one's medium, which one's heavy, just make sure that you hit your Undaunted passives. The build is 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. Okay, so we've got our mismatched Undaunted core. Moving down, you want 2 endurance. So here are our 2 endurance, and you want it to be healthy traded. So 2 endurance healthy, and then your remaining core is any 3-piece set that has health, and there are 2 of these. There's Clever Alchemist and there's Glory. Glory can be formed from Maelstrom. So if you have 1 accessory available in the set you're trying to run, then you can do Clever Alchemist and a light Clever Alchemist belt, and the benefits of this is that you can bring Nirnhone to bear, which is definitely good for a Sunshield build. The downsides to running Glory accessories here And endurance sword and boards here is that you lose the Nirnhund, but some sets that you're going to try to cycle in, namely Leeching Plate, Eternal Yokodai, they don't have an option for you, so you're going to have to put 5 heavy in these lower slots. If you have the 5 heavy in this lower slots, you'll have to switch to a light Undaunted and a light medium Undaunted. So keep that in mind. The build will shift around depending on what sets you try to put in. So recapping real quick: infused big pieces, divine small, 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. All healthy accessories, all Magicka recovery enchanted, and Nirnhund on your weapons if you can get it. If you can't get it, sharpened is your best choice, your best next choice. For your stone, you're going to pick the Atronach, the Magicka recovery stone, and now we're to, which 5-piece set you're going to run. Now here's the cool thing about this build. It works with any heavy set that has at least 1 health bonus. So it could be, you could work in Kagranax, you can work in the new Eben set, which is one of my choices. You can work in Phasaelus Guile, which is my favorite PvP choice. You can work in Eternal Yokodai. You can work in Leeching Plate if you've got it. Any of those weird heavy sets that you've always wanted to try. Permafrost is another one that you can work in. Absorb magic from your sword and board line counts as a shield. Your sun shield counts as a shield. If you're not a vampire, Permafrost is a real fun one to work in. And you might say, well, what does that do for you? Enemies are going to be calculating what you're capable of as you fight. If you're constantly switching around your 5-piece, then you're constantly renaming what you do. And that has power in it. You can make people want to kill you because you're rezzing all your friends and with Kagranax, and then shortly thereafter you can make them not want to kill you because you have Leeching Plate on and you're an immortal god. Or they don't want to attack you because you have Phasaelus and you'll heal cut them. You could play around with what you're capable of and really mess with the enemy. But for our core, I really feel like Eben or Phasaelus is your main go-to set. So this is my main PVE setup. So I've got my 5 Phasaelus, I've got my mismatched Undaunted, I've got my Clever Alchemist 3-piece, I've got my 2 Rings of Endurance, Magic Recovery Enchanted all here, all Health Enchanted, all Infused Big, Divine Small. This is a really fun build too for PvP. It's like a tank, not tank. You can't stand in the middle of a Zerg forever, but you can sort of tank that Zerg for a little bit. And so what you want to do to really get the most out of this build is you want to basically make people flip-flop their decisions on whether they want to attack you or don't want to attack you as many times as you can. This build doesn't kill people, it gets people killed. And as long as you understand that strength, it becomes a strength, not a weakness. What you're going to do is set people up to be killed. The problem that happens is that with a Blazing Shield build, your offense is based off of their offense. So if they're killing themselves, they're going to stop. That's the main problem. Now you can try to pick up kills with Jesus Beam, you can try whatever you want to, but the bottom line is when they go defensive, you're not going to be able to kill them. You lack the direct offense to do so. So in that way, Blazing Shield is not really a solo build right now. But think of the preparation. If you go in first and you lower everybody's health to half to 30%, somewhere in there, and you heal cut them, just about any DPS on your team can come in and clean that clump up. And That's what this build does. You will get ignored sometimes. During that time when you're being ignored, do things that make them have to refocus on you. Res your friends, harass their healers, drop siege in front of their face. Anything you can do to make them look at you again. Use your invigorating drains to interrupt important DPS combos. Just be a total toot until they turn back on you. And then once they turn back on you, immediately start working to shed the aggro. That's what you do. You get aggro by being annoying, and then you shed aggro by being hard to kill and gooky. So let's go over the PvP skill setups. First, we have Absorb Magic. This is a good heal for you. You don't want to overuse it, and you'd also want to be careful about letting the shield confuse you about your Sun Shield's shield strength. See, Absorb Magic counts as a shield, so it's going to make you think that you have some Sun Shield up when you don't. So be real careful about that. Only cast this when you hear or see a projectile incoming and you want to get a heal off of it. You can rotate things like Heavy Attack Absorb Magic, Heavy Attack Blazing Shield, and completely shut down builds like a Magicka Nightblade. Your shield is protecting you here, your heavy attacks are helping your stam sustain, and every time you catch one of these absorbs, you're actually healing yourself for a decent amount. Next is Invigorating Drain. This skill is, its heal is based off of missing health, so when you're low health and stalling out and you hit this, you actually get a pretty hefty heal off of it. All of these heals that I'm going to talk about are boosted by standing in your channeled focus and your purifying ritual, and so that's really nice too. The main draw of Invigorating Drain is the long range CC that you get from it and the increased ult gen. You get 5 ult gen every second that you tick this thing, and that's real important. The Blazing Shield is going on both bars because we never want to be without it, but it serves 2 different functions depending on which bar it is. On this bar here, it's a defensive measure. We're moving around. We've got Purifying Ritual to get rid of snares and binds. We've got Channel Focus to make us tanky and have good sustain. On this bar here, it's aggressive. We've got our Shielded Assault Gap Closer, and we've got our Warhorn. So you can think of it in 2 different ways. Don't be afraid to use it defensive on this bar if you need it, and don't be afraid to use it offensive on this bar if you need it. But it's there on both bars whenever we need it. We chose Shielded Assault because Shielded Assault's shield, whenever you charge you get a shield. It's HP based, and we're 100 Bastion, full HP build, so we actually get a pretty sizable shield just from hitting this Shielded Assault. Now you may say, we have stam sustain issues, don't we? Not really. Whenever you shield charge a target, if you immediately start a heavy attack, no matter what they do, you can usually connect that heavy, which means that you can heavy weed your shield charge and stay on somebody when you normally wouldn't have the stamina sustain to do so. So keep that in mind. It's also really nice to have a Sun Shield that has a lot of damage on it and it's almost busted to sideswipe with it. Say you have a proc stat that's about to go off and you've got a shield that's about to go off and it's got a lot of damage on it. You can charge into somebody who's not expecting it and deliver a lot of fun burst. And Structured Entropy is here on both bars mainly as a booster for the health, the 8% passive health on your Sun Shield. You can consider it a flex slot if you wanted to. You could take it off for something else to get more room on your bars. The main thing that's devaluing Structured Entropy is that Might of the Guild isn't procced by any of the stuff that we do. It doesn't proc on proc stat because proc stat is considered a dot. It doesn't proc on Blazing Shield because Blazing Shield is considered a dot. Clouding Swarm's a dot. If we were to cycle in Jesus Beam, it's a dot. So pretty much nothing that we do is benefiting from that major, from the Might of the Guild passive, the 20% increase. So it's really just, and also our spell power is so low that a 20% boost to it really doesn't help us out. So it's literally just on here for the passive 8% health increase. Warhorn is our ultimate with low weapon damage and low spell damage and low stats. We don't have an ult that scales. So we're looking for ults that scale in a different way, and Warhorn is that ult. It directly increases our Blazing Shield damage, all of our heals. It gives us major force for 9.5 seconds. That next 9.5 seconds you can really make a stand. And you also help your allies. You boost your allies' damage. This is really important in PvE. It's not as important in PvP, but it is fun to use. Our off-bar ult is Clouding Swarm. Now this one took a huge nerf. When you hit this Clouding Swarm, you really don't want to be standing still. The invisibility is no longer that useful anymore. People can still hit you in the bats, and it doesn't really break damage all that much. So you need some fancy footwork when you hit this if you want to use it to shed aggro, which is originally why we loaded it. Some suggestions would be to hit the Clouding Swarm and then wait for the full second for the invisibility to actually take hold. When you're in there, watch your bars to make sure they don't gray out, because that means you're CC'd and you need to CC break that. Dodge roll to clear whoever's on you, and shield charge to someone far away if you're using this ult as a way to shed aggro. But it can also be used as a way to sort of taper the amount of incoming damage by lowering, some people will screw up whenever you Clouding Swarm and stop hitting you. It's good for that. So you can continue to make a stand, Blazing Shield spam, even though you're in Clouding Swarm, and there will be enough damage that your Blazing Shields will be popping non-stop. The Purifying Ritual is here so that we can move around what we want to and to boost our heals passively. Be mindful of the number of debuffs that you have on you. It's pretty easy to spam this. It's not that hard to keep up, and it really stops things like that Bombard spam or a Talon spammer. When you need to move, you can move because you have Purifying Ritual. Channeled Focus is here for the Magic Recovery buff. You get this buff for 8 seconds after leaving it, which makes it worth casting on cooldown if you're moving. But if you can stand in it, it's way better. So it has a little bit of flux on how much Magicka region it actually represents. But you want to cast it on cooldown if you're moving and stand in it if you can. It's not the end of the world if you have to leave it. Just remember that 8 seconds later you need to throw it back down again. It really helps you sustain your mana. In this is our flux slot. Procstat for when you're in group play and there's a lot of targets. Jesus Beam for when you're in small play and there's not a lot of targets. Neither one of these skills hits very hard for you because you have low spell damage and low magicka. But they both have scaling factors that make them hit normal people hard. Radiant Oppression, it's an execute. Low health targets will still die to your Radiant Oppression even though you're not DPS focused. Procstat, it's a head count boost. If you're standing in the middle of 11 people, your Procstat will hit hard enough to matter. So that's kind of how that works. And that pretty much concludes our PvP skill layout and our itemization for PvE and PvP. Okay, now we're in PvE, and we're going to be talking about the PvE aspect of things. We got our Evan armor back on, but real quick I'd like to go back and mention what kind of potions I use in PvP. I use these Essence of Spell Criticals. Through Heavy Weaves and just not using your stamina for blocking that much, you have pretty decent stamina sustain. Pretty much when you want to use it for something, you have it. So you don't need full-on tripods, which means you can use these Essence of Spell Criticals. There's a couple of recipes for it, so you can look those up. One of them is actually pretty cheap, so they can alleviate a lot of the cost of running tripods as well. You can still run tripods if you want. but this is just another option. It gives you Major Prophecy, which boosts your crit rate up enough that you're critting about 1 in 3, which is pretty good. And it still restores your health and magicka, which are the two stats you really need your pot to restore. In PVE, we use Essence of Magicka Trash Pots and Tripods. The Essence of Magicka Trash Pots are pretty much there for any time you have to do like a gauntlet pull of taunting and you're going to be shredding your magicka to hit all your taunts. Once you sort of settle into the rotation of a trash pull, you're fine on mana sustain, because you've set your mana sustain up to sort of be region based over stat pool based. We only have 10,137 magicka with this build, which is, it seems like how could you function with that low magicka, but because our regen is so high, especially with this skill down, this channeled focus returning mana back to us, it's kind of like we have this tiny little sake cup and we empty it in a sip, but we've got a big barrel of sake right over there that we can just get up and get another cup's worth. And that's what playing a regen-based character is kind of like. So the only time that that's a problem is when you have to taunt a lot of things in rapid succession. And that's what the trash pots are for. The tripods are there for just general upkeep. And I'm going to let you, I'm moving towards a mini-boss that I can actually actively show you some things on. And I've got to clear the trash to get there. So I figured I would just let you watch me clear the trash as, you know, another sort of gameplay opportunity. And I'm going to try to simulate like there was a party here with me. I want to get that thralled brute taunted and eventually taunt everything, but he's the main priority and the archer's the main priority. These are the guys, these warriors, it doesn't really matter if they stay on the party for very long, and so that's what we're going to do. Step 1, we want to pre-buff our proc stat, then put down our channeled focus. And now that we got everything taunted, we want to start picking up the stragglers with our stam bar. Through all that, our stamina is absolutely fine. We can even, you know, see things like that and block them. We can see things like that archers move and bash them. We can block a little bit if we want to. We can dodge roll a little bit if we want to. And with a healer with you, your health is just fine the whole time. So that's kind of an example of, you know, how this build can play. Just like that. So now that we got the boss alone and we can really sort of show you like a nice stress-free rotation, pretty much you're gonna try to match his sun shields for damage. So he just did a special move and we want to just feed that right back to him. Every time you see a move that could CC you, you want to tap block. In the meantime, any space that you get where nothing's going on, you want to be making sure that you're in your taunt rotation, that your channeled focus is up, and that's priority 1. Priority 2 is to use this skill right here, Invigorating Drain. Now don't be afraid to cancel that. And the reason for that is Warhorn, so that you can really help your group. This is a group support build. You've got Eben raising everyone's health threshold, and then anytime you're not stressed and you don't need to Sun Shield or Taunt, you can be fluffing your ult gen to pump out more Warhorns for your group. The main important thing is to hit that priority taunt first, not overstress your magicka or your stamina, block things that are going to CC you, and keep your channel focused up. Anything extra, like lacing in a proc stat, that's all extra. And then keep this thing spamming. Now, Invigorating Drain has some funny properties against things that are CC immune, and that includes targets that you've already CC'd. It performs weird. So it's a channel, which means it shouldn't be able to be block casted, but here against this CC immune boss, you'll notice that I can actually just block cast it. And really fluff up my my ult gen. On top of that, against a CC immune target, you can actually start the channel and then do heavy attacks while the channel's happening. Which means if you've got a Sun Shield up, there's no reason. You can see on the left side of my screen that all ticks of the Invigorating Drain are still happening. So if I have a fresh Sun Shield and the guy's taunted and my channel focus is down, then I can start this this Invigorating Drain and then heavy attack for stat sustain. And that's kind of how your rotation is going to go on bosses. Your party's really going to like having that extra health from Eben, and your party's really going to love the fact that you represent about 1.5 to 1.7 of an aggressive Warhorn rotation, meaning that it's actually possible for your raid to drop down to 2 aggressive Warhorn runners over 3. So, just some cool little demonstrations. Let's go ahead and move into CP. Oh, wait, real quick. So the difference between PvP bar and PVE bar is we load our 2 taunts, we drop our shield charge for that on this bar, and on our off bar we drop our purifying ritual for that. We leave proc stat. If you feel like purifying ritual is actually really beneficial for a fight, maybe there's a lot of cleansable dots, then you can drop proc stat for purifying ritual. But otherwise, proc stat is actually pretty good. Even with your low damage, it scales really high in a trash pool and helps you, deliver that instant burst. I keep Clouding Swarm on my off bar for the regen boost, but a replacement that's possible, and if you're not a vamp, the replacement is Empowering Sweep. It's a low cost ult that gives you flat DR, so definitely can easily make its way into the rotation. Okay, now moving on to CP. Your red tree is pretty simple. We're going to put 97 points in Bastion, and that's to get to 24.5%. That is pretty much the most effective amount of Bastion points that you're going to get for just raw shield strength. And then the remaining points we split up. I'm going to explain something interesting about CP here. A lot of CP trees, and I'll leave it for you to test on your own, but a lot of CP trees will round up. So the moment that you break a half percentage, it's not actually worth it to spend up to the next percentage unless you're going to break the next half percentage. So we've used that to find out the optimal amount of CP to get rid of our 70 extra points. And we've done that to do 33 hardy, 25 elemental defender, and 12 thick-skinned. And that's how we spend our red tree. We wanted the maximum amount of cost reduction for our sun shields, and then we split the rest into Mooncalf and Arcanus. You can even these up a bit and get a higher regen if you like. We had 7 points left over, and we put those into tumbling because why not? The blue tree is where the important math happens. So essentially, there's sort of a weird representation in the tooltip on what happens with CP and any boosts to Sun Shield's damage. And this is the optimal setup for Sun Shield damage that you can actually do. It took me a while and a bit of math to figure this out, but you want 18 Elfborn, 78 Elemental Expert, and 68 Thaumaturge, and then the remaining points can go into Spell Erosion. So let me show you what I mean by that. For every point, you see the Sun Shield tooltip, if you were to read mine, it would probably look different than yours. Because at the bottom here it says when the shield expired it explodes outwards, dealing 74% of the damage absorbed to nearby enemies. Now most people are used to that saying like 53%. And you're probably wondering how I got it to say something different. In Cyrodiil, this top number, 37% of your max health, will also be lower. It'll be at 19%, I believe, for me, and probably 15% for you. That's because CP and a lot of effects, including things like using the Storm Atronach synergy, changed what's said on this Blazing Shield tooltip. Now before you say that sounds OP, it actually maths out to be the exact same thing damage-wise. It's not any kind of advantage, but it really makes it nice and easy for you to see the effect of your CP. So by putting points in Bastion, you raise the percentage, the top part. Points in Bastion are about half as effective, and they say granting a damage shield equal to X percentage of your max health for 6 seconds. That's what Bastion's going to change on the tooltip. That percentage will be higher. When you go in Cyrodiil, that percentage is halved, and the amount it's boosted by Bastion is halved. But out here, it's full, and we can get up to 30%, 37% of our max health, and that's enough to give us a 22.212 shield. It also raises by 4% shield strength per enemy hit up to 6 enemies, so that's another 24% shield strength, and that is not halved in Cyrodiil, and it's not halved in PVE. So in a clump of monsters, your Sun Shield can actually get pretty big. Then any damage booster, like if you use an Empower, it will change this tooltip but not actually reflect in the damage. But like if you use a greater Atros synergy and get the major damage boost, this number down here at the bottom will actually increase by 10%. And the way that you spend your Thaumaturge and Elemental Expert CP will also increase this. So by having an efficient expenditure of CP in the blue tree, we're able to raise that to say 74% of the shield strength value, which lends itself to some pretty hefty Sun Shield explosions, especially when they crit. So you might say, well, what about when we get more CP? Well, it's basically simple math because it, as I mentioned before, CP rounds up. So imagine that we have no CP here, and we put 1 CP in it. So it's going to be half as effective than 1% because of the way that the Sun Shield tooltips work. So that's 0.5%. And the game goes 0.5%, rounded up to 1. So I get 1% increase to that number. So I go from 53% to 54% off 1 point. 1% increase. So what happens when I put a new point? 1.6 gets halved. Now it's 0.8. 0.8 rounds up to 1. We're still at 1. 2.2. 2.2 gets halved to 1.6. Wait. Wow, I'm stupid. 1.1. 1.1 is rounded down to 1. We're still at 1. 1.3, still at 1. Now we're at 3. 1.5. 1.5 rounds up to 2. So now we're at 2%. And you can see how spending these points, still 2%, still 2%, still 2%, 3%. So basically, by efficiently spending those points and knowing where these CP stop to be effective, we can fluff up these points. So when you get more CP, essentially you're going to want to go through here and spend and do that math to see, can I actually get another point? So like I can bring, if I had 10 more CP, I could bring Thaumaturge to 78 and I would get a point, and so on and so forth. And so when you get more CP, that's kind of how you want to spend it. Until these trees are maxed out, Elfborn ceases to be worth it. So when we get more CP, you want to max out these, max out the effectiveness of these. It'll probably stop being effective around 98. So both of these will go to 98, and then you can start working on your Elfborn. And Elfborn works the same way. It has cutoff points of effectiveness. If I were to put 19 points in Elfborn here, it actually wouldn't help me. That's why I have 3 in erosion, because these points, this point, they're all worthless. So I really only need the 18 points here. And until I can afford to spend up to, I think the next cutoff is like 22 or 28, there's not any point in me putting these points into Elfborn. So I put them into spell erosion. And the same thing applies if you have less CP. If you have less CP, you want to do that math and slowly reach the points at which you're actually benefiting here, and sort of math it out to get the most effective split between Thaumaturge and Elemental Expert. So I'm going to cancel the redistribution there. And so that's sort of the conclusion of this Sun Shield guide. Again, you can run whatever 5-piece you want. My recommendation is Ebon for PVE, absolutely. Phasalas for PvP, with Ebon as a side option when you don't feel like your Phasalas is doing well. And just my own personal opinion on this build, it's actually been really fun to tank on this build in PvE. I was really surprised that I enjoyed the PvE on this build more than I enjoyed the PvP. This build will absolutely tank Vet Maul. The new content, it does very well in it. There's about one thing in the game that it can't tank, and that's ESO. There's 2 things in ESO that are really hard. One, the Manti hits like a freaking truck. Hardest hitting monster in the game, hands down. Puts a massive bleed on you. It just... shield tanks are not going to be able to stand up to that. It's an attack that you have to block or you will get one-shotted. This build won't get one-shotted by the Manti. It actually won't, which is kind of funny, but you're still taking so much damage from the Manti that you can't recover. So it's not a build for ESO. And then the second challenge of ESO is massive, massive taunt spamming for the tank. And that's the weakness of this build. You know, you really have to manage your resources when you're hitting your taunt rotations, and having to taunt like 10 trolls in a row is going to be a little bit too much for this build. But missing out on one dungeon doesn't mean you shouldn't run this build, because it absolutely is a hell of a lot of fun in the rest of the builds, and it is made for Vet Maul. You've got things like, one of the challenges to a tank in Vet Maul is to have your armor and SR cut. Shield tank doesn't care about that. You're good to go. That greatsword user can pierce your armor all he wants. The silence on the Twins boss, whenever he throws it on you, you have time for one action. That one action can be Sun Shield, and you can just casually walk out of that dark floor negate. And when the boss winds up his uppercut, you actually just let the uppercut knock you out of the silence. I don't care. Just let it hit you and say, whee! Really great tanking build for the new dungeon. I hope you guys enjoy this build, have a lot of fun with it. Feel free to tinker with it, change what you like, or no, keep what you like, change what you don't like. There are a lot of fun skills that you can throw to be annoying. You can kick in a Aurora Javelin, Luminous Shards, Eclipse. Stay away from things like Repentance and Breath. that need you to have high magic and high spell power, or vice versa, to be effective. Stick with abilities that maintain their annoyance or their effectiveness based off of the skill itself, not on any type of scaling. But other than that, there's a lot of things that you can rotate in and have fun with. It's one of the few builds that can have fun with Immovable Brute. Because of its heavy attack weave, you can actually keep this up a lot in PvP and not be CC'd. Again, it's a real fun build to play. It's a nice change of pace if you're used to playing a block tank, because this is not a block tank. You do block, but it's reactive because of some kind of CC attack, and you go, oh, nope, don't hit me with that. And it's literally a split second. You just go, blocked it, and then you unblock it. You don't have to sit there forever doing this. Anyway, that concludes my Blazing Shield guide, and I hope you guys have fun in PvE and PvP with it. As per usual, I forgot to do racials, so tacking it on here at the end. Normally the builds I make are not that racial specific, but this unfortunately is one of them. You want to be an Imperial when you run this build. If you absolutely cannot be an Imperial, your second choice will be Argonian. Outside of Argonian, you're really suffering if you're not one of those two races. You can try it on a Nord. High Elf is sort of works with it. You're losing a lot of max HP in exchange for a little bit more Sun Shield damage and magic recovery than this build has. Outside of that, it's really no other race is going to help you. So you can be creative and try out whatever race you want to. I'm just, giving a pretty hard opinion that Imperial's definitely the best, Argonian's a close second, and Nord and High Elf can work in a pinch. Probably High Elf being better than Nord. Anything less is just not really going to play into the strengths of the build. So there's the race choice section. Sorry about leaving it out and tacking it on here in the end. I'll try to endeavor to be better about that. I don't know why I always forget to do racials, but I do. So